again, thank you all for joining us. I feel like we got people from all over the country, which is really good. So what we're going to do is every once in a while, normally, we have a guest speaker, a researcher, or advocate, or a farmer come on and kind of give us a presentation. We just wanted to take this opportunity this month. There's a lot going on with the early onset chapter. Kristin and Debbie and I have been doing a lot of work, and we just wanted to fill you guys in on the work we've been doing, the progress we're making. It's really exciting time right now for pediatrics and non-ambulatory. And we just wanted to let you know the work we've been doing. Also, we want to get any kind of feedback you guys had, anything maybe you'd like to see us do, or communications or anything else, any kind of feedback you guys had for us to make the chapter better. And again, thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy days, your busy day to be with us. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the slideshow. We're gonna kind of tag team here with myself and Kristin and Debbie, because we've been doing the bulk of the work here. But again, like I said, if you have a question, hi June.
Hi.
Welcome. So if you have a question, please stop us, jump in, and we'll be happy to answer your question. If you just want to make a comment, if you have an insight or something that we hadn't thought of, we'd love to hear it. So just give me a second and I'll share my screen. We'll go through a couple slides. And like I said, please, we want to keep this conversation. We don't want to speak at you. We want to speak with you. So please, we'd love your participation. So we are the early onset chapter for the FSHD Society. This chapter, and you can go ahead and advance it. We're here to support, educate, and advocate for parents and children, and to bring trials and treatments to everyone in the FSHD community, regardless of what age they experience symptoms, how severe they are, and whether they're in a wheelchair or not. We just really want to come together as a community. We started this group, you can go ahead and advance. We started this group in late 2020, and how this came about is FSHD Society asked me to be the Arizona chapter director, and I started doing that. And then I just realized I didn't really have a lot of connections with other adults with FSHD, because my son is really the only one in my family that had it. And I realized there wasn't really a place for parents to get together and talk about their experience with their child, and where I could go to get answers or advocate or learn more about the early onset FSHD. So we put this chapter together. I called up Kristin. I'm like, Kristin, can you help me do this? She was running the North New England chapter at the time, and she said, sure. She has a daughter as well, and I have a son with FSHD. So we got together. We kind of laid out a plan of what we wanted our chapter to look like. We officially started in January of 2021. We started monthly meetings. We reached out to researchers, physical therapists, geneticists. Everybody has been very, very generous with their time to come on and try and educate us. We record this meeting, like I said, and we usually get a lot of views. People will come back to me after they have time to view it and ask questions and stuff. And basically, we just wanted to give the parents and the children a voice. We realized they really didn't have a voice. People were sort of just thinking about FSHD in the traditional terms of its onset later on in 20s, 30s. And a lot of people really weren't even aware that there were a lot of children out there who had very severe symptoms, and that they were, struggling every day, and parents were struggling to try and find answers and desperately seeking access to research, to trials, because ultimately we all just want, treatment. We want all of our kids cured. We want all adults cured. So we started this parent community, and it's been very successful. We've had a lot of members, and a lot of members of our chapter are people who aren't parents. Are also we have a lot of researchers that come and view our meetings every month, and they'll reach out to me. So we have really made an impact, and I think that our reach has gone a lot farther than I had ever imagined when we first started this chapter. You can go to the next slide. So, like I said, we realized that there was a gap in the early onset or children pediatric community. So we started this to gain an understanding. What we did is we went out and we learned as much as we could about research from the doctors. We brought them on so that they could talk to the parents, so that the parents could be educated on not only to understand the disease, because we had geneticists on that kind of explained in layman's terms, but also that to make sure that their child was cared for and then they were supported as we were working toward the ultimate goal of getting a trial and a treatment. We realized that there were a lot of parents, because we're spread out all over the world, and the neurologists all kind of say different things. You know, we heard from parents in California that their neurologists were telling them something from somebody in, say, New York. So we wanted to get a collective voice and get the experts on, of the FSHD experts, to no kidding give the parents the truth about how to best care for their kid while we are ultimately looking for that treatment to come down the pike. So that was a gap that we saw. Go ahead, June.
No, I didn't say anything. Let me.
Okay.
It's made back.
So, and then
go ahead, Kristin.
to quickly add on to that, the other thing is also parent to parent. So, you know, learning from other parents that have kids that are older than yours is also like, hey, my doctor's recommending this, and reaching out to the group and saying, did any of your kids have to go through this? I see those questions go all the time. And the more we can support each other with this roadmap that's not been defined, then the better off we're all going to be. For an example, they were recommending my daughter go in for tendon surgery. And so I was able to lean on parents that have older kids that have gone through those surgeries, and their feedback was instrumental in helping us make a 360 decision, not a decision just based off a doctor's opinion at that point in time, along with bringing in all the experts in the FSHD field from, joining in from a call with doctors that didn't know the disease that well, that could explain things to these doctors as to why these aren't the best ways to go about it. So the support of making sure that we are not doing things that to the kids that are being recommended from doctors that don't fully understand the disease from a 360 standpoint. I've heard other parents get bamboozled into surgeries just because the doctor said that's the way it should be, and they had them and they were not well received, or they were not necessary surgeries. So, just leaning on each other to hear from each other's perspective. It doesn't mean that we have the medical advice. We just have the experience of what we've had with our kids that we're willing to share, so that you have more ammo and more information to go back to the doctors with, and to learn how to navigate the unnavigatable. I don't even know if that's a word, but so that support has just been huge for me, just as an example. You're on mute, Ally.
We also realized that there were barriers to treatments that the pharmaceuticals were working on, the researchers were working on, and Kristin really tackled that. So I'm gonna let you talk to that, Kristin, about all the things that we've learned about so much, because it's just a complicated, convoluted system, unfortunately. And for the last 2.5 years, we've really asked a lot of the hard questions, and we're learning like what we need to do to forward our children into that pipeline of, hopefully there's a treatment for FSHD coming down soon, and we want to make sure that the kids are brought along. So I'll let you talk to that part, Kristin.
So the whole treatment process is a long one. It's a marathon. So it's every mile is a celebration and or a loss. But one thing that I had always just assumed after Caitlin had been diagnosed was that when a treatment happened, the treatment would be for everybody. And as we've gone through the process, when Ally called me that one day to say, will you start this chapter? The thing that resonated with me was, she said, we won't know whether these kids will actually get treatment or not. We don't have that guarantee. And all of a sudden the alarm went off. And I started to reach out to anyone in the pharmaceutical field that would talk to me. And sure enough, that was the truth. We don't know for a fact that kids will actually be included in any type of labeling of a drug or treatment that, fulcrum's coming down the pike. Hopefully it's a success. If it is, it's typically probably not going to be for children, because the clinical trial and the white label that will go through most likely will be matching the clinical trial audience. So that's 18 to 65 and ambulatory. So all of a sudden the alarms went off, where I was like, wait a minute, if there's a therapy and then all of a sudden my daughter is not going to have access to that, that's a problem, because she can't wait to 18. And so I wanted to dive in and figure this out. It is not figured out. This is probably one of the most complicated processes that I've come up against in my career. And so we have learned many different things have been told to us, and you can't take what's been told to you at face value. You have to constantly check, double check, go back and ask more questions. Never take anything at face value when it comes to this. We have been told that pediatrics will be involved. We've been told pediatrics will not be involved. We've been told that more research needs to happen. We've been told that this is a completely different disease. We've been told that that everything is fine and that they'll get the drug. It just may not have insurance pay for it. So we've been told the entire thing with every time we have a conversation with somebody. So what we've been able to deduct by having multiple conversations is what is the best path forward to figure out how to get kids on the roadmap and moving forward into the being at the table. And we're not saying that kids have to be a part of every clinical trial. That's a parent's personal choice. It's just having the options, because right now we don't have those options to put our kids in clinical trials, even if they prove safety. So we also learned that non-ambulatory was also being left out. And this was a new conversation that we've just discovered in the past few months as well. So so in going through, we've learned that researchers are all researching, and that's what they do. And that's great. We need that research because that's how we've gotten to where we are today. But some of them have shared data, some of them don't. And some of them are talking with one group and not talking with another group. And so there are silos and they're slowly breaking down, but we need to work as parents more to advocate and understand and not allow silos to happen, because that shared information is so incredibly powerful with moving any type of research or any type of therapy through the process. And we've also learned that parent participation in a survey is extremely important as well, because the researchers need to understand the appetite that parents have for whether they would actually be involved. If they're going to go through all this work, will anyone show up? That's a concern. And so we helped them put together a survey. We've sent it out to a very small sampling so far, but there's going to be more of that coming out to the whole parent community to try and engage interest, engage their levels of participation, and what could they tolerate with visits to clinical trial sites, and what could they tolerate with what types of drugs they were willing to actually put their kids in, and at what point would they put it in trial 1, or would they want to wait till safety is over and they want to get to 2Bs or 3s. So all of those questions and all of those things is getting the parent group ready and trial readiness to actually get a clinical trial. We also learned that they're saying that there isn't enough data to create clinical trial endpoints for kids, especially kids that are not walking. And so we have conflicting data going on that front as well. Do we have enough data? Because there's been surveys done in Australia, there's been surveys done in the Netherlands, and there's some saying that there is plenty of research out there on kids. It just needs to be brought in, and pharmaceuticals need to be able to read it. So bringing those groups together is a focal point that we have in this process as well. So we are at the beginning of stages. We are getting conversations rolling. We have a survey going, which was not happening before. We have a research group's getting ready to launch a natural history on just kids, which that's the first time that's really happened as well. So it's all in the very beginning phases, but 12 months ago, these were not the conversations we were having with pharmaceutical or researchers. They were just telling us it's all going to be fine. And now 12 months later, the conversations we're having are very different, and they are very interested in the pediatric world. They just need more data and more information before we can get some positive momentum of what this actually means and where we're going. So that rolls into the advocacy and awareness. So Debbie, you want to talk a little bit about that? You're on mute, Debbie.
I thought Ally was going to talk about the last one, but I can talk about the survey. Do we want to do that now or later?
You can talk a little bit about just the advocacy and what you're learning about the parents, and how we're relaying that back to researchers and the interest. You've been talking to the researchers directly, so I think it'd be interesting for people to hear their take on the research that you've actually done, and responses.
Okay, so I did talk to, I've been talking to parents and trying to get information from them. Part of the survey was about whether they would travel for treatment and how far they're able to travel and what they're able to pay for. And that's all helpful for the researchers to know. We've also talked to, well, you've been talking to the Duchenne's group, and we've talked to some parents from SMA to learn. We've had groups who have done this before, so there's no reason to rewrite all of this. So we wanted to learn what they've done and how we can copy some of that. Whether that's
been a big part of helping us learn too, is that we aren't doing this in a silo. So we have talked to Cure SMA. We've talked to parents with Cure SMA. We've actually talked to the board of Cure SMA, and we've also talked to Duchenne's groups as well, and parents who are deep in the advocacy world. So we've gotten a lot of this from that, and that their whole take is it's the entire package, but it starts with that awareness. It starts with, Debbie was reaching out to parents one by one to talk to them about what was going to get them involved and aware. The more that we can do that as a community, and the more we can rise up as a voice, the more people are going to hear, and the more people are going to know about us. It's also the regulatory, it's also the researchers, it's also the pharmaceuticals, it's getting everybody into the picture. And the biggest part that we have learned, and that Debbie has learned a lot from, is this survey that she can go deeper into the results later on, but it's a starting point.
June has a question.
Not a question, but I just want to really reinforce what Kristin has been saying, which is all of this getting to, doing the research, getting to clinical trials, even for adult FSHD, it is the patients who have always led the way. Okay. And so the parents here need to lead the way for their kids. There are researchers out there who want to help, but if they don't see parents getting engaged and saying, I'm going to sign up my child for a study, they're going to say, okay, I don't know if I can risk spending the next several years of my life trying to get a study off the ground and nobody shows up. Right. And Dr. Statland is actually doing that right now. They're applying for funding to get a study that's going to need 80 kids. And they're a little bit like, I hope people will sign up when we've just spent months and months writing this application. And so the patient community, the parents need to do their part. And but it's more than that. It's that, as I said, they have always led the way in any disease, but especially in rare disease. So sometimes I talk to people who have this idea that there are these people out there, the researchers, the government, that are setting an agenda, deciding what's going to get done in a vacuum. They're not doing it in a vacuum. They're doing it in response to pressure from patients.
Well, not only that,
I think researchers have come right out and said that it's not just we definitely have to get our kids involved and participate in the studies, but it's also the advocating that it's, we've heard from groups and researchers in FSHD that really is parents who have pushed this along. So it's I think both of those, the participating and the advocacy.
And also the realization that pharmaceutical is only going to do this at the end of the day if they see a positive outcome. They're not nonprofits. So I don't mean to say it so bluntly, but you can't show that there are numbers and people willing to participate, then the pharmaceuticals are going to go elsewhere, because they cannot afford to run clinical trials that are going to have patients that do not show up to end up not having a drug that gets through at the end of the day, because they are a business and we do have to productize what and what we're asking for, as well as an advocacy group.
Kristin, if you go on to the next slide, we can talk more about some of the things that we've done. And we'll get right into like more specific about our advocacy and what we've specifically done. And if you guys have any questions about any of that, please jump in. The way we support parents, I think we've talked about this already. You know, we recognize that importance of parent-to-parent contact. We establish a hotline, a parent hotline, that if you're new to the newly diagnosed, or if you just have a question and you don't know anybody's phone number to reach out to, you can reach out to this hotline. You leave a message, and then myself or Kristin or someone will call you back. June made me the admin for the parent Facebook group so that we can interact with parents and postings and keep them as informed as we can. And then again, just educating and reaching out, like she mentioned, Debbie, one by one, and the advocacy, we can go into that. I think we've already talked about that, the survey and the Duchenne and SMA groups. Debbie, do you want to talk any more about the survey?
I can show some of the data if anyone's interested, or just kind of give a little recap. I think it's just a good example of, you know, when Kristin mentioned the barriers to treatment. I think
Debbie, I gave you sharing rights.
Yeah, thank you. I'm working on get that going here. Okay, so basically this is just one example of what they started doing, and I've joined in to help with when there's this barrier to treatment and we're trying to get kids involved so that parents have a choice. They went to pharma and said, okay, what do you need? And then some of the answers were natural history. We need a paper written. So they said, okay, well then let's get it done. Let's, you know, push this along. Let's see who can write a paper for us, who can do this natural history. So one of the things that we've done is we have a researcher who is going to work on trying to do a retrospective natural history, and wanted to know from parents, what are the questions to ask? How do we find out, how do we look at the progression? What are the symptoms that a lot of kids experience? So we'll be able to tell how they're progressing. So I had designed the survey. It was basically, we brainstormed a list of symptoms and we asked parents to indicate what symptoms their children have experienced. So we had 15 kids with FSHD are represented. And then I wanted to also have 15 who don't have FSHD, so we can compare and say, okay, this is how our kids are different. And I want to thank parents who helped with that, because we wouldn't have any idea of, you know, the quantities and what our kids are really experiencing if it, you know, if it had just been the three of us doing it. So just really quickly, just to show, I don't want to get into all the details, but the main thing that I wanted to just show is not quite as much with this slide, but if you compare, the left is kids with FSHD, the right is those who do not. You know, you have some kids with vision or hearing problems and some allergies, but if you look at the left, you know, there aren't as many zeros as there are on the right. And so kids with FSHD have constipation and leg pain. And then if you look, this is just more, and we know this as parents with kids with FSHD. If you look at the symptoms, our kids have all these symptoms on the left that are because of weakness. And, you know, one kid had one symptom. On the bottom, as you see that long bar, that's an indication that they had no symptoms. None of the above applied to them. This is mobility. So how they're walking, if they need a brace, if they need help. You know, our kids have these challenges, the others don't. Trouble washing hair, showering, the challenges they have with self-care. On the left, none of the kids on the right have, without FSHD, have this trouble. And then this is recreational activities. So I think just the point is that we were able to see how, you know, really specifically see how kids are affected, and we've been able to share that information with researchers. And yeah, I think it's been helpful, like a couple of the avenues and meetings that we've had.
And I just want to reiterate that Debbie did this all on her own. Like we said, we talked to some Duchenne parents and they said, this is what the information you need. And she created the survey and she sent it out. and it's a lot quicker than, if you're in a big organization and it has to go through all the wickets. She just got it done and sent out, and we got results really quickly, and we got those results to researchers very quickly. Because we're a small group and we're sort of autonomous, we can do that kind of stuff. So that's one of the kind of things we've been doing. Can you get to the next slide again, Kristin? Does anybody have any questions about that survey or any of the results or anything before we move on? So I think Debbie mentioned that we have been advocating, supporting research articles about pediatric FSHD. Hopefully there's one in the works right now for a retrospective from the U of R registry. Kristin's been really done a bang up job about connecting with the pharmas and researchers and trying to really understand the drug development process and trying to look at it from their eyes, like what do you need from the patient, what do you need, what kind of data do you need from the researchers to connect those dots, so that we're just not doing research for research and that they're getting what they need. And I think that's really important. Another one of the barriers, and this is kind of, it was a surprise to me, and because of where I come from, with the only FSH person I really knew was my son, and I knew his symptoms. But a lot of the traditional FSHD onset, they didn't even really realize that even in the community, people within the community that had FSH, they didn't realize that there were kids out there that struggled as much as our kids, or that they were losing their mobilities in their teens. So we created a couple of videos. I created a video, myself and my son, with the help of Kristin and Debbie, and we sent it out and was shown at the World FSH Connect conference as it launched into the pediatric breakout for it. And it really just kind of drove home that these kids cannot wait. Time is mobility and a lot of other problems, and we need to do something now. We need to come together. So I think that video was powerful, and it showed to the community that there are other people out, that there are more severe symptoms out there than what a lot of people thought that what FSHD was. I think, we kind of helped redefine that there's a whole nother population out there that needs to benefit from this being expedited. And we can talk about this more in length about it's led to the first small summit sponsored by Solve FSHD. And we're going to that summit in September. It's going to be myself, Kristin, Debbie, representatives from regulatory agency, from the pharmaceuticals, and researchers all come together and just having a conversation around what are the barriers and what are the obstacles in getting kids into clinical trials. And let's knock down all the old, paradigms about this needs to be done or that needs to be done. Let's just get to the meat of it. What do we need to do to know kid make this happen, and how can we do that? And I wanted to talk a little bit about what June said about it's really driven by the parents and the patients. So this MOVE Plus study, it's a natural history study that's being launched by Dr. Statlin with the CTRNs. And part of his grant for the NIH to get the funding for it, they have to have patient input. So we wrote a letter, myself and Kristin and Debbie and another parent formed a group, and we signed it, and we said we support it. So this is a requirement for them to get these grants, that you have to have patient input. And that was a surprise to me. Like June said, a lot of times we sit back and we just think that this is going to happen, but it won't happen without our input, and they can't get these grants without patient input. And June has asked me to write an article that I'm going to submit to the advocacy. I see that you have a question. We're going to get back to that and talk about that more, because I think that's the meat of this, Vera, about the summit. And we're going to publish that, and so everybody knows kind of what we're doing, where we're going. And let's go back to the summit. We can talk about that for a minute. So the summit's going to be held in Northern California. It is sponsored by Solve FSHD, and it's going to be in September of 2023. Do you want to talk more about that, Kristin?
So I think you covered pretty much what it's going to be about. We're bringing in 20 very hand-picked research and pharmaceuticals from around the world, and the entire conversation for the 2 days is going to be about how, what are the barriers for pediatrics, and what do we need in place for pediatrics to be in clinical trials. what are basically the next steps, and leaving that summit with the plan. What is it? And really honing in. We have regulatory people coming as well as legal people coming to help not only talk about what are some of the things that research and pharma are missing, but then also there as a voice to help any questions that pharmaceuticals may have and saying, well, we can't do this because of that. We will have legal and regulatory in the room to say, no, actually you can if you do it this way, or no, you're right, you can't do it that way, right? Validate, so that we have all the voices collectively in one room so that we can actually have a plan moving forward. So we're excited. It's the first time something like this has been done for the pediatric community at FSHD from such a focal point worldwide. So what the outcome will be, we will update all of you. But there will be breakouts where we won't be there because researchers and pharmaceuticals need to talk without the parents there so that they can be open and honest, because there is something that I've learned through talking to different groups is that sometimes the holdback and the mystery to information that we're getting is because they don't want to tell us the bad news. And so they will divert, or they will lighten the blow, whereas they get more done when they don't have parents in the room, so that they can actually be truthful and honest and get to an end result. But we will have advocacies in the room that they can talk openly to when we're not involved with certain aspects of it. So again, what the outcome will be, we don't know, but we're just, it's a huge movement forward again. This was not on the books even 4 months ago. So, this is moving much more rapidly, and it has to do with the advocacy work and the support of, Ally being out there talking to these different groups and getting meaningful videos in front of these groups. And then all of a sudden, people started answering our calls.
And yes, Vera, it will be exclusively pediatrics.
I was going to say, it'll bring you great joy to answer Vera's question.
Yeah. Yes, exclusively pediatrics. Go ahead, June.
One thing, or a couple things. One is that video. I mean, showing it in that venue, that was had measurable impact, because Eva Chin from Solve FSHD was there, and she literally called Ally like the day after the meeting. So, right, Ally? I mean, I think
she contacted Kristin, but yeah.
Kristin, yeah. So,
well, I had been contacting them for over 2 years, every single month, and they had the intent of always getting back. But it was the video that pushed her over the edge, where after I knew the video went out and I knew she saw it, then I struck again. And then that's when she was like, I'm so glad you emailed me, because you've been on my list.
Yeah. So all of these sorts of campaigns, I mean, they're so important. You have to be persistent and relentless, and also strategic. And I think all of us working together, because as you know, I've been pushing internally, advocating for pediatrics for years, and finally I said, this, we've got to put it on the agenda for the IRC, like not just lost them, a bunch of few things scattered among many others. Let's focus on it, because it's timely, and the whole field needs to pay more attention. And the video really, I mean, we showed it several times over the whole, and in different settings it really reinforced that. But what I was going to say is, I think from the Solve meeting, the summit, it would be really great to produce some kind of publication, a white paper or something, just something in writing that can be distributed, because from my perspective, one of the things that has just bogged the field down for years and paralyzed this is this fuzziness, the lack of, like, I was getting the same, like, hearing one thing from one person, another thing from another person, and I'm going like, what is the truth? And the reality is, no, there are things people don't know. Nobody can predict how the FDA is going to rule on something. Nobody can predict how the insurance companies are going to decide whether to cover a new treatment or not. But but there's a lot of change going on. And a part of it is, with more expensive treatments, insurers are getting more and more reluctant to pay for them unless there's been a trial in that population. We're seeing a trend, and we're going like, okay, we got to get ahead of this. We don't know what the future is going to be, but we have to take the best information we have now and strategize around it. And having the results, the conclusions from this meeting will be really important, because it puts everybody literally on the same page. So that, instead of being mired in this miasma of uncertainty and unclear messages.
Yes, agree with all of that.
Can you
I'm
go to the next?
Fuzzy June.
Can you go to the next slide, Kristin, please? All right, so we've been talking a lot about all the things that we've been doing behind the scenes, Kristin and Debbie and I just wanted to kind of just summarize it with that people are listening. And we had a meeting recently with someone, I can't remember who it was, but a pretty high up researcher or pharmaceutical, and they're like, we've heard of you, like people know who your group is. So we are being heard. And I just wanted to summarize this video. These are the things we've done. And maybe it hasn't led directly to this, but like June said, there are a lot of people out there who had it on their radar, but they just hadn't gotten they just hadn't been spurred or gotten the right nudge or gotten the patient buy-in to pursue it. And I feel like these are things that we have done that has led to that. It has either helped spur that on, or it's the right time, right place. But we went out and we did this, and we're seeing results. And then that's what I want you guys to know, that we're working hard, and this is a part-time gig for us. We're all volunteers. We all have very busy lives. We're taking care of, disabled children. We have families and jobs, and we've gotten all this done. And sometimes we felt like we're spitting in the wind, but I'm telling you, we're seeing results now. So we started this group. I went to Kristin and I were both supposed to go and give a presentation at the FSD Connect, but then Kate got COVID and she couldn't go. But we had a well-received, we had a breakout session just for parents at the FSHD Society, gave us a breakout. And that was where we really connected with a lot of the pharmas and the researchers and the PTs and the doctors and the parents. And they were asking us, and it was attended by over 100 people virtually. And it was very well received. It kind of put us on the map that this is who we are. This is what we represent. This is where we're going with this. This is what we want to accomplish. And then I presented at the Volunteer Leadership Summit in Chicago last year, and we talked just about pediatrics. I gave a talk just about pediatrics and the need to get them in the trial conversation and in the conversation period. And then they dedicated a full day of a pediatric session at the World FSHD conference. I don't know how much June had to do with that, or the FSHD side, but somebody was listening, right? Somebody said we need to take a whole day and we need to talk about pediatrics. Then June already talked about the video we created. We created that video. We got in touch with Saul. Kristin did, and now we're having a summit in 2023. I've been invited. There's going to be another pediatric European neuromuscular conference in the Netherlands in Q2 of 2024. June connected me with the folks that are running that, which are all the high-level FSHD powerhouses in the community. I'm going to go there in Q2 of 2024, and it's again just a pediatric summit only, and they're only going to talk about pediatrics in Europe. Myself and another parent are going just to represent the families. And June, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, this is another direct outcome from the presentation and the video at the International Congress, because Nicole Vorman saw that. She's the kind of head of the European Clinical Trial Network, and she is fantastic. I mean, when she sees something like, you're right, we need to do something about it, she moves right on it. And I was amazed, like within a month of the Congress, she was calling me saying, we're organizing this year ENMC workshop on pediatrics, et cetera. So I think it made a real impression when people saw Sam talking. They saw, Kate and the two, parents. It wasn't an abstraction anymore. It had a face to it. And they suddenly felt accountable. But they suddenly realized, everybody's like, yeah, that if we got to treatment and children didn't have access, that would be a big failure for the field. And I think also so important because, in medicine, kind of separate pediatrics from adult, right? And any parent, has seen a child going from it's kind of crazy. It's like all of a sudden you're going from one doctor to a different doctor, you're going to a different hospital. It's like two separate worlds. But the vast majority of people with FSHD start as pediatric patients. And it's a continuum. And among those are people who are going to become in wheelchairs. And I think the more our community realizes that these what we call subgroups are really relevant to everybody, the more I think that's also really important, which Ally said at the volunteers, leadership summit, is the pediatrics are about all of us. Everybody should care about it. It's not just, some rare of the rare subtype.
Right, and through all this networking and all the things we've done, then we've been able to connect to other advocacy groups, the Duchenne and the SMA. They've already been through this. They've gone through the steps. They're ahead of us. We can learn from them. And Kristin's been great with connecting to them, getting their lessons learned, getting their blueprint print, so we can get there faster. We don't have to make the same mistakes and stumble over the things we stumbled over because they've cleared the path for us. So it's really important for us through the networking that all these connections that we've made to get there faster and learn from what they've done. And then, like I said, with the parent survey, we were able to get it done quick and get that information. We didn't have to, sort it through all these wickets. So I just wanted you guys to see this summary so you know that the things that we are doing are resulting in real things. They're resulting in real conversations, and they're moving pediatrics forward and the non-ambulatory forward into the clinical trial pipeline. People are listening to us, and I had no idea when we started this group how important that voice was, how important the parents' voice were. We have to speak up for our kids. Our kids aren't going to understand all this stuff. We have to be there on the front lines for them. We have to bring them along. And if we don't, we have to. So, June, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's big, hats off to you and Kristin that you did a lot of hard work to understand the science, the way the research is done. It's complicated stuff. Most people don't know it. But it's so important because now you can engage with the people who can make a difference with ideas that, that connect with them. They say, I can do something about this. You're talking my language. You understand the world in which we work. You understand what's possible, what's not possible, and what are the gaps where we, if we did this work, we could get there. So, so it's advocacy combined with a smart, strategic, like knowing the playing field. That's super important. And you guys did a lot of work to get there.
Right, because, we all can shout from the rooftops we want our kids cured. We all do, for sure. But we have to understand the process to get there, and how can we help them get there? Because none of us are researchers. None of us, are doctors or work in pharma. But we can certainly help them help us. And that's what our intent is, to help them help our kids. But we can't do this all alone. We need you to participate in the surveys. And when Debbie goes out and asks for your input, when she asks you to send a clip in for a video, the more voices we have and the more faces we have, just like June says, it makes it more real, right? It makes it, hey, this is a kid that's suffering. And if they wait until they're 18, that's too long. Please get involved, ask questions, offer ideas. When we first started, I didn't understand any of this stuff at all. And we're just learning, and we're still learning along the way. You can learn too, get involved, help us out. Debbie joined Kristin and I. Kristin, we were just talking about this earlier. She joined us, and oh my gosh, she was able to get so much stuff done because she used her talents. She brought her talents and what she could do and offered up, all the things and reaching out and all the stuff that we didn't have time for or just wasn't our talent to do. And she came in and she just like exponentially, exploded what we could do. And that's just one more person. So I know there's a lot of parents out there that have a lot of talents and they're passionate about getting a treatment to their kids. And we just need your voice. And we're not, do what you can do. We all know that, we only have so much time in a day, but there's something that everybody can do, a little bit that everybody can do. And attend meetings. Come here. I appreciate all you guys being here. Watch it on YouTube if you can't attend, and reach out to other parents and other community members. Offer your support, offer your ideas. Tell them, hey, about our group. Hey, this group is here and we're ready to talk to you and we're fighting for your kids. You guys want to add to that, Kristin or Debbie?
No, I mean, you summed it up great. You know, the more power in numbers. You know, I think the thing that was so refreshing with Debbie was that she was like, what can I do? And we we're like, we don't know. You know, we're trying to figure this all out ourselves too. This needs to be done, or that needs to be done. And just by listening, she's like, why don't I do this? And then she took the survey because she's got a physical therapy background. She was the most qualified one out of the three of us to handle anything medical. So, you know, so leaning on her for that, it was like, wait, that's amazing. You've got a physical therapy background. There's so many more things that you can help us with understanding different papers or researching and how the medical field works from that perspective. So just leaning in and offering a hand. You know, we have such limited time, and that's the most frustrating part. I wish I could quit my job and do this full time, but I can't. I still have to make sure that my family is provided for. So that's not an option. So I do this at nights and weekends and when I have the time, and that is not enough hours in the day for what needs to get done. So, you know, so the more numbers of people we have reaching in and listening and saying, hey, why don't I do this? Or what about this? Or I'll learn about this, the better. And, you know, so it's, we just need more people. And then with Debbie doing her advocacy work now, where she's putting together videos that will be used to highlight kids and non-ambulatory people, the more she can get, and, you know, ease of access to videos, ease of access to people, and people willing to sign off on the paperwork that she needs so the videos can go out on Facebook, you know, the better. And the more we've proven it, the more we've added Maggie's voice into everything now. And it's making things that much more real. But it's not just Kate and Sam, which is all the kids we had prior. And now we've got Vera's kids are being added into a video that Debbie's working on right now. So having these multiple voices, it's so, I watched the draft that Debbie's been working on for a conference we have coming up, and adding Vera's kids in with Maggie and Sam and Kate, watching that you've got numerous children now. I mean, there's no way to deny that there aren't kids out there with this disease.
Well said. Yeah. And thanks to June. June has always been a champion for us.
Yeah.
I email her and text her and call her, and she's always there to answer and to listen to me vent even sometimes. So I appreciate her so much. She's always been, like I said, a champion for us, and always said, hey, don't forget about the kids. So we appreciate June very much. And she knows everybody in the FSH community, and she's been wonderful in connecting us to all these different people. But we are one united community. You know, a pediatric patient isn't any different. My son's not even considered a pediatric patient anymore. He just turned 18 this summer. So, but he is. Everyone with FSHD is, you know, pediatrics or not, we're all one community, and we all need to move forward and not leave anybody behind. We can't leave pediatrics behind. We can't leave the non-ambulatory behind. We all have to cross that finish line together, or it's not a win. It's not a success. You know, we can't step over them and then look back and go, oh, I'm sorry. You know, that's not acceptable. We all have to get there together. All right. So we've been talking a lot. We want to hear from you guys. You guys have anything to say or questions or anything that you want us to take forward to the summit, or any kind of ideas or anything that we haven't thought of?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, it's Jessie. My husband's picture is probably showing. So I did go, Kristin, to Columbus to go see Dr. Flanagan, and recently, and he was amazing. I am so excited that we went there. I cannot wait to go back. We really still didn't get a lot of answers for our daughter. And then when I asked to do the MOVE study, they said that she was too young. And so I kind of got really disappointed and sad a little bit, because I feel like we got so far, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're at this great hospital and we're going to do so good. And then we're like, okay, we can't do the move study because she's too young. And I'm thinking to myself, this is something that is so frustrating to me, because I feel like they would be able to get so much information from her. So Debbie, I know that you're, talking with other parents that, are younger, that hopefully maybe, my daughter would be able to be a part of that, because I feel like she's on such a different spectrum of FSHD. And there is another, I'm going to put it in the chat box, but there is another gene that she has. And we've done some research. Me and my husband have done some research with it. And there's been some studies with this. It's called BAMS. I don't know if you guys have probably heard of it or not. It's very rare, but it has a lot to do with FSHD, and they haven't figured it out yet. But that is basically, it's some kind of gene. If she had it, she wouldn't have a nose. And so she does have a nose. And so anyway, there's been some research about it, and I'm just hoping at some point they can use her for that research at some point. But
Your daughter's 3, right?
she turns 4 in September. Yes.
So we are working with Dr. Statlin for this PED study, and basically when we wrote the letter, we emphasized that we wanted everybody included, regardless of age, severity. So we're really pushing to, I think it's just a matter, and the Aussies are going to help us with this, because the Aussies did a study and they had a wide range of kids and a wide range of ambulatory status in there. So we are pushing for that. We're trying to broaden that, the rate, the age range, and the range of severity that are included in these trials. Because I agree with you, and I think all of us agree with you that there's a lot to be learned from those kids, and I think they're missing a huge opportunity when they don't study them.
I think that they're aware of that too. And I was just going to say that I think it's really helpful to have that information from parents. The many people who responded when I reached out to see if, there are people who didn't know about MOVE yet. So, I made notes, and when we met with them, I could tell them there are this many kids younger than 5, or this many people contacted like these sites and couldn't get in. And so I think that they've learned from that. And we've already had feedback that there's going to be some differences as they move forward. So
yeah, they're putting in they're putting in some other coordinators that will then be able to route people to different, so that you would know ahead of time that this is not a site that was actually taking pediatrics.
And Jasmine mentioned that her son was 4, and so I think that's one of the points, is that there are some differences at sites, and maybe some are not able to take kids, but I think it's helpful for them to have that information, so that all the coordinators can be on the same page too.
That's part of the fuzziness, or trying to unfuzzy that gene.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I was going to say, I think when we think of what they do in the MOVE study, or any study, a clinical trial, they use what we call instruments. And you think of instrument as like a tool, or, a screwdriver, a hammer, whatever. So for FSHD, it's things like, can you climb stairs, or can you put on a coat, or can you do these things? And for some of those instruments, there's a limit. If you're too small, like you're too short to go up those stairs that they use, or you do a walk test, and obviously you're a kid, you're not going to be able to walk as far as a grown-up. Well, how do you compare? If they feel like it's apples and oranges and so on. But people have been talking about developing a pediatric toolbox. And this is something, you need to, we often get into chicken and egg situations. Like, you want this toolbox. Well, to get the toolbox, you need a bunch of kids who will try a bunch of things so you can validate that it really works and you can measure it, accurately and reliably across a group of kids. And you get into this situation like, well, we don't have the tools to do it. Well, you need to study a bunch of kids to do it. Well, okay, we can do that, but we don't have the tools, So, so again, I feel like this is something where other diseases where it's these young kids who get it, that they've developed some of these tools, like in Duchenne or SMA. And I think at Kevin Flanagan is at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and I think Linda Lowe's is now going to be the principal investigator. So Nationwide has just joined the Clinical Trial Research Network. So it's the first pediatric neuromuscular center that's joined the network. And I think it would be really worth a conversation with her about, let's develop that toolkit so that your daughter can participate in the,
Yeah, they did, there was a lot of people very interested in her when we went, which made me excited, right? Because you want all these doctors coming together to get these ideas and thoughts. And so they did say that they were going to bring her genes up, her DNA on a round table with other doctors. And so I'm excited about that because, you never know what other doctors might see or have seen, and the information that and feedback they might get back. So we're kind of excited about that. So we're not like hopeless, obviously she'll turn 5 soon. But it's just like one of those roadblocks you kind of get discouraged about. But I love being able to come here to stress that because, a lot of moms and dads and parents and kids and everything that have FSHD, we don't have a lot of outlets that people understand what we're going through. So I want to thank all of you guys for letting us have that place, a safe place to be able to come and talk about it with everybody.
Jasmine, how was your experience with your son, a 4-year-old? Was that, you think he was able to get measured?
Oh, it was a mixed bag, right? It's a really long process of step by the test that they need to do. So it's like an hour and a half they spend with the patient doing testing, which is really tough for a 4-year-old. So there were a few things that they were really not set up for pediatrics, to be completely honest with you. In fact, one of the researchers told me that my son is one of the very few, it's like the only child below 10 that they have, I believe, in the study, at least in Stanford, because that's where we're based out of. And so there was the raincoat test where he has to put on a raincoat, except it was a adult men's large. And when my son my son at 4, he has a little more struggles, a little more now, but when he was 4, he was able to put on a coat just fine. He could not put that coat on at all. There were, they do PFTs, pulmonary function tests as well. And oddly enough, it wasn't even set up for an FSHD patient. It was a purse your lips and blow study, which, for even adults, that's
not going to work well.
Yeah. And so, I had my first true pulmonology visit with my son, and they have this one that you insert inside the mouth and bite down, you can blow into. So I'm totally not understanding why they don't use that for the study. So those were the few things. And then ultimately in the end, honestly, so I am in the medical field. And we had Kaiser Insurance, which Stanford obviously does not take. And it was a nightmare trying to get him seen for the MOVE study. I spent hours on the phone with insurance, with schedulers, with a lot of different people trying to get him enrolled and insurance to cover the MOVE study. Because otherwise it's out of pocket.
Oh, wow. I didn't even have to provide insurance.
Oh, well, that's great.
When
They won't, the neurologists
in Rochester.
Oh, nice. Because the neurologists at Stanford will not see. So the MOVE study split into the neurology appointment and the physical
Mhm.
therapy appointment. The physical therapy part can be covered by the study. They didn't ask for any sort of insurance, but the neurology appointment, they will not take Kaiser's neurology. They will only take Stanford's neurology, and that needed to get covered by insurance, or else I pay out of pocket. And so it was a struggle. The MOVE study was truly a struggle to get my kid into and through. So it's exciting.
How old is your, sorry,
ahead.
how old is your son now, Jasmine?
My son just turned 7.
Oh, so he's just like my daughter.
Yeah.
Just very similar.
So yeah. So yeah. So I'm excited to hear that you guys are looking at a natural history study specifically for children, because truly MOVE is not focused on children. So yeah, I think you're right.
And there are some outcomes or measurements that the Australian group has been working on, and then Dutch group has been working on, and hopefully, I don't understand why it's so hard to take those and just move them in the MOVE. I don't understand why they haven't already. But maybe that's a question we can ask, like, what are the barriers to this? Why is it so difficult? I mean, just from us outside looking in, just take that study. You've already used it on kids. And part of the PEDS MOVE is to validate the Australian outcomes. So hopefully they'll use those Australian measurements, and it'll be a lot easier for kids. That's what we hope for. And I don't know about the Dutch, but they have been doing some studies on kids too. But part of the paper that we wrote for the NIH grant, it kind of outlined all the goals of the PEDS MOVE study, and one of them was to validate the Australian measurements. So I assume they're going to be using those primarily, correct, June?
I would assume.
So hopefully it will be a lot easier for all kids.
I think if anyone, I just want to mention, if anyone did, Jasmine, I kind of wrote down what you mentioned, but if anyone does have situations like that, I think it's, good to collect that information. I'm trying to collect all of this information because, they don't know if we don't tell them. So, I think now is the time for them to tweak some of that, I think, as they're moving into a different form of it.
That's a good point. Good point. And we pretty much have a direct line to them, or if we don't have a direct line to them, we can certainly send it to June, and she has a direct line to them to say, these are the problems that the pediatric population are encountering, and then they can work with it. But yeah, like Debbie said, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, that's a really important role for this group, to be kind of the ears on the ground, or sort of ombudsman, sort of kind of helping you navigate and improve communication, or between the researchers and the parents.
But that is a good point.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say it is different, when I can say to them, well, 5 people told me their kid's too young to do it, and then they're surprised, versus, one person calling and not hearing from me. It like, to have the numbers and see, like, we missed out on 5 kids. So that makes a difference if we can give them that information.
Especially like with their wanting to do it. Like, it's not just like you found 5 kids. It's like us as parents, we're wanting
there,
our
ready to
kids.
do it.
Yeah, like we're
Yeah.
here. Exactly. And I love that. Thank you for doing that.
I've told them multiple times that I want the children to be treated like diamonds. Like, always like, here's Debbie with her diamonds. Like, here's a diamond. Don't lose our pediatric FSHD diamond. Use them, please.
One thing with the CTRN is there are 12, now 13 sites, and they don't always communicate all that well amongst themselves. I mean, they try to, but each one is operates a little differently than some of the others. So like, some of them didn't get the memo that we're now taking pediatric kids, or some of them said, well, we're at capacity, so we're not going to take anyone, and we don't, so
I think it was set up with the capacity, and that they realized to do it differently. So I think that will get better. But yeah, I think they're learning a lot from.
Yeah, communicate that back to Jeff Statland and Michaela. They will act on it. They'll do something. So
Okay, if we don't have any, I think this was a good conversation. Hopefully, everybody will have a better understanding of all the things we're working toward and support us in everything that we've been trying to do. And we will get back with you once we go to the summit and we go to these things. And like I said, we'll ask them to write a white paper, or I'm not sure. I'll talk with you that offline, June, on how we get that done. But we will update you on what we learned and keep you in the loop. We promise you that. And we will keep updating you on the things that we're working towards and the things that are successful and things we're having trouble with. And we will ask you for help. Even if it's just participating in surveys or videos, or maybe lending some other expertise. But please, if you can't help in the way that we ask you, or you don't know where to help, like Kristin said, just start asking questions. There's, we kind of just fumbled into this as well, and start learning as much as you can and lend your voice to us. Kristin or Debbie, do you guys want to say anything else before we close out? Thank you guys so much for being here. And we will be back in touch and let you know what the outcome of this summit, and hopefully is something very concrete and something we can all celebrate. All right, thank you guys very much. Have a good night. Thank you so much, Kristin and Debbie and June and everyone for being here.
Bye.
Bye.